My name is Jonathan Ayling. I'm the Chief Executive of the Free Speech Union, and over the past 4 years since we set up, we've become the largest civil liberties organisation in the country. So, Nick, do you want to introduce your role?
Yes, hi, my name is Nick Han. I'm the Education Partnerships Manager for FSU, and we work, of course, across the education space in secondary schools, universities now as well, and particularly trying to encourage adults who may not be in tertiary education or school anymore, but they want to understand a bit more what their rights are in regards to freedom of expression.
We'll be joined as well momentarily by our liaison officer who helps navigate across 8 professional memberships that we've set up. And so the Free Speech Union set up with the initial goal of opposing the hate speech laws that were released in 2021. We don't believe it is the government's role to pick and choose which opinions people can hear that are otherwise legitimate speech. And what you'll see through as a thread through the comments that we'll make today is that by no means does this suggest that any of these ideas or any of this speech is constructive, is good, is correct. It is to suggest that a better way to challenge speech that is unconstructive or incorrect is through dialogue, it is through counter speech, rather than through censorship. Prior to 2021, when the Free Speech Union set up as an employment union itself, we now have over 113,000 supporters around the country, over 13,000 donors, and thousands of professional members that we represent in an employment capacity as well. Prior to that, the Free Speech Coalition, which was our predecessor, had set up as a small legal committee to challenge certain decisions, primarily in local councils, around use of public venues. And this conversation emerged as part of the exchange that we had with the Taupō District Council. Back in 2018, it was Mayor Phil Goff of Auckland who decided that he would unilaterally prohibit certain individuals from using public facilities there. And that was a case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court and was a strong decision that has compounded the case law we've continued to make around use of public venues. Our premise there is very simple. Again, not that all ideas spoken in public facilities are correct or good. I know that you will all agree with us on that, but that ratepayers have a right to use the facilities that they pay for to express legal ideas. And through that, we have seen the case law very concretely established on this issue. And we have engaged, along with Taupō District Council, with about a dozen councils now: Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Palmerston North City Council, Rotorua Lakes District Council, Blenheim, and a number of others as well. What I want to do is briefly work through a bit of a presentation around the core ideas that we hold on this issue. And then I would love to be able to open a wider conversation. I understand that there are members of the public here today, perhaps some that are ardent supporters of the Free Speech Union, and others that take it with a little bit more of a grain of salt. Wonderful. We're really pleased to be able to share this conversation together. I will also note on a hopefully a more jovial tone that my wife and I have a commercial vineyard in the Wairarapa, and we've bought a couple of bottles of our Free Speech Union Liberty Blush to share with you today, so your council and staff can enjoy those later. We won't pop those quite yet. Which remote do I need to be using? There we are. Wonderful. So the mission of the Free Speech Union is to fight for, protect, and expand New Zealanders' rights to freedom of speech, of conscience, and of inquiry. We envision a flourishing New Zealand civil society that values and protects vigorous debate, dissenting ideas, and freedom of speech as cultural cornerstones. And there's 2 features that I want to draw to your attention there. One being that we believe free speech is the foundation on which liberal democratic societies have been built. And as our society takes a more questioning tone of what is legitimate speech or how we counter bad ideas, what we are challenging is the premise on which the most peaceful, prosperous, and stable countries have been founded. Free speech is the premise on which all of our other civil liberties and all of our other human rights actually springs. It is the idea that we are free to speak for ourselves and to think for ourselves. We see our elected leaders as having a critical role in that. We see our lawyers as having a critical role in that. We see our academics as having a critical role in it. But really, our engagement is through civil society. We believe that unless Kiwis as a whole believe that the best way for us to advance knowledge is through dialogue and discourse, that we are able to reference an objective reality and through dialogue pursue that together. Unless we succeed in convincing the wider public of that, no council, no law firm, no university will be able to protect us from the implications of that. The Free Speech Union is an organization that's set up in 2021, and since then a number of other free speech unions around the world have set up with our support. So we were the second after the UK set up. And then we also have sister organizations in Canada and Switzerland, in South Africa, and in Australia as well. We expect over the next 12 months, we'll probably have another 10 built there as well. And that is across the world. We think that, we don't just think, we know we can empirically demonstrate that, particularly in the developed world, particularly in the West, and especially in the English-speaking portion of the West, the Anglosphere, we are seeing basic speech rights and conscience rights rolled back in ways that are relatively unprecedented in our history. If you refer to Jacob Nshangama, he is a free speech historian and expert out of Vanderbilt University. Just last week, he produced his most recent copy of data tracking the erosion of speech rights around the world, the Free Speech Network's Global Free Speech Survey. And what it demonstrates is, particularly in English-speaking countries, this is an area where we are losing ground and the implications are not particularly clear. I grew up in Mozambique. I was born in Whangarei, but my parents were humanitarian workers, so I left as a baby to live in Mozambique in the late 90s. It was the poorest country in the world that had just exited being a Soviet satellite state and had newly embraced democracy. And when I moved to Mozambique in the late 90s, just south of Mozambique, South Africa had just emerged as the Rainbow Nation. They had just finished apartheid, and Nelson Mandela was president. And he was held in universally high regard. And he said, no single person, no body of opinion, no political or religious doctrines, no political party or government can claim to have a monopoly on truth. If we had truth, we wouldn't need free speech. Unfortunately, truth itself is a contested concept, and even if we do agree some things are true, what those things are is a very fraught idea. For that reason, truth can only be arrived at through the untrammeled contest between and among competing opinions, in which as many viewpoints as possible are given a fair and equal hearing. It has therefore always been our contention that laws, mores, practices, and prejudices that place constraints on freedom of expression are a disservice to society. Three of the guiding principles that our team works with is that we are credible, we are moderate, and we are principled. We work across speech issues, regardless of which end of the spectrum that they come from. And we believe that the work that we are doing on this is nation leading at the least, probably even in comparison to other FSUs around the world, perhaps world leading. I do not think a law firm in the country can offer a better legal analysis than our law team, and so that's why I'm pleased to have some of our staff here today. We'll run through this really quickly. These are some of our high-level numbers, and we work across 4 core work streams: cases, campaigns, content, and coaching. Cases are the individual cases before the courts that we've taken that protect and expand speech rights. We've taken cases all the way from employment tribunals and professional regulatory bodies through to the Supreme Court. And while we haven't always gotten everything we wanted, we actually haven't lost a case yet. Campaigns, this works at our institutional level, and Steph, who joins us here, works across 8 core professions that we've identified as key cultural levers that we need to be engaging in order to make the case for free speech more strongly in New Zealand. They are academics, lawyers, teachers, healthcare professionals, religious leaders, media, public servants, and IT professionals. Content, we had about 400 media references last year. We do tours. I recognize some of your colleagues from the event that we held here at the end of last year. We produced reports, and Nick leads our coaching workstream, which is an endeavor to, over the next 15 years, create a new free speech generation that works from middle schools all the way through to adult education. And I'm grateful to be able to participate in this conversation where hopefully we'll all learn something new today as well. So that's what we do, but why do we do it? A lot of people come up to us, particularly those that of, shall we say, a slightly different generation, of those that are perhaps over 50, that are surprised that free speech needs defending. They think it is a self-evidential feature that people get free speech in a free society. But because free speech was so well embedded in our society, and over the past 70 years, we've taken it so much for granted. In many ways, we have faced an erosion of these speech rights. And so it is really important we continue to articulate, why is this the foundation on which free societies is built? Why does it matter so critically? And there are two reasons for that. I hope you will keep both of these in mind as you adjudicate on issues that relate to free speech, because we like one more than the other. One is more palatable than the other. But if we do not defend both of these reasons for free speech, then we will find we actually see it eroded very quickly. The first is obvious, and I think no one here will disagree. I don't come across, well, I come across almost no one who says they don't agree with free speech. They like this first reason. Actually, nowadays, there are some people that say they don't agree with free speech. It's a fairly radical position to take, I suggest. But the first reason is broadly accepted universally. It's that the ultimate good is better reached by free trade in ideas, that the best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted in the competition of the market, this marketplace of ideas. It's a perennial feature. Thomas Gordon said in the famous Cato Letters that without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech. Einstein himself said that science can flourish only in an atmosphere of free speech. In reality, the scientific method of a hypothesis, a test and a proof, is demonstrated more broadly across society through the tenets of free speech. So this is all erudite, noble stuff. No one here disagrees. What? We all like this. There's no debate there. But what about the other thing? What about when ideas are clearly wrong? What about when there is clearly malice in what is being shared? What about when it endangers the identities of individuals? Surely that isn't speech that we should protect. So free speech, yes, but surely not misinformation. Surely not hate speech. And this is the narrative that has been fundamentally embedded in our public discourse today. That yes, we like free speech when it is ideas that are broadly civil, that are broadly within Overton's window. But let's not push it too much, eh? Because words are dangerous. Well, I agree at one level. There's nothing more powerful than ideas, I think. Again, it brings us back to our fundamental contention. Not that all ideas are good, certainly not that all speech is helpful, but that the best way to challenge unhelpful and dangerous speech is through counter speech, not through censorship. And so why do we have to defend misinformation as legitimate speech and hate speech as well? Because the other thing is, without freedom of speech, we don't know who the idiots are. There's a idiot detection device built into allowing people to talk. And if we will but listen to them for a few minutes, we actually then understand where they're coming from and the implications of what they're saying a lot more. And I think we are only weaker and more impoverished for not understanding our opponent's arguments, as incorrect or as hateful as they may be. Now, whenever we put this graphic up, a picture of George Orwell saying, boy, did I call it or what, when we put it up online, we have people come out and say, George Orwell never said that. And I say, no shit. But I think the point there is relatively clear, that we actually are engaging in practices that previously were considered dystopian. That it's not 1984, but we are buying into ideas and the corruption of language that actually was the premise of both Orwell's contribution and others as well. Nick will be leading our members book club shortly on Fahrenheit 451. Is that correct? Yep. And again, it is something that perhaps some of you read in an English class in school, but we've stopped doing that for some time, and I think that's unfortunate. We have to be willing to defend the ideas that we find the most detestable first of all. Otherwise, free speech means nothing. And I think I can relate to the way many people connect with certain ideas and certain speech and certain events that want to be held. And by no means is our defense of speech rights in any way a defense of those ideas. It is a defense of the fact that we are better for knowing what the idiots in our society might want to say. Alex Pink was the chief executive of Maxim Institute up in Auckland, a think tank there, and ahead of the election 2 years ago now, he said, if some groups feel that they have legitimate views that can't be shared or are not met with or that are met with hostility, they either won't participate or won't accept the outcome of the election. And that's how nations start to unravel. And again, I want us to be a little bit more forward thinking than just going, bad idea, shut it down, we win the day. What are the implications of us approaching information and speech and ideas in this sensorial way? I think we see what the implications are. There are 5 particular issues, what we call our 5 sacred cows, that dominate much of the work that over 100,000 Kiwis have ended up supporting to pursue. Our budget will be $2 million this coming year, nothing from government, all of it from Kiwis, and most of it from about $80 donations. It is a grassroots network that has been quite successful because there is a lot of concern in our communities. Now, you don't have to agree with whether they are right or not, but please note that many Kiwis feel that there is real danger to this basic freedom at the moment. When we did polling on this recently, not so recently, about 15 months ago, 75% of Kiwis said that free speech is a defining cultural value. But a majority of them also said that it is under threat and is being rolled back. And I think it is very important that our elected leaders pay attention to this. We see on issues like the trans question and Posey Parker's visit here 2 days ago. It was the 2-year anniversary of what happened at Albert Park. No one won in what occurred there. You don't have to agree with Posey. You don't have to disagree with Posey. I really don't care. I don't think she's a particularly exemplary proponent for her perspective, in my personal opinion. But what happened there was an outrage. What we've seen happen recently is also an outrage, where on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, at a Te Atatu library, Destiny Church show up and busts into a drag queen storytime meeting and does a haka there. And we see condemnation for that. And we joined in that condemnation. But we must treat these issues as evenly. This is Thug's veto, where individuals threaten force in order to shut down ideas that they don't agree with. It is not my job, and it is not your jobs, to take a position on those questions in your political capacity. You may in your personal capacity. It is our jobs to defend the basic right for citizens of New Zealand to participate in discourse, whether others find it cantankerous or positive or not. We also see the protest at Parliament. Again, agree, disagree, it doesn't really matter. What we see is a tap into a nerve there of communities who feel disenfranchised and excluded and shut down. And what is the fool's errand of censorship is that we may exclude their opinions for a moment, but what does that do? Does a single person who is told that they're not allowed to speak out on an issue that matters to them, does a single person walk away and go, oh, well, I guess I'm not allowed to talk about that anymore? All we do is infuriate them and actually push them into a corner more. And for where those ideas are dangerous, where they are explicitly wrong, what we actually do is we give a faux grievance and a legitimacy to them by suppressing them. We press them out of open discourse, and they fester there far worse. And finally, of course, the Stop Co-Governance Tour. This was an issue where across the country, we did not see our leaders engage the issue in a way that they needed to, in a way that was nonpartisan, to allow bad ideas to be beaten by better ideas or allow the truth to come out of where we didn't expect it. What we see is a corruption of language, in my opinion, and I please understand what I'm saying here. I'm not calling, certainly not Taupo, and even generally the situation, I'm not calling it authoritarian. But this is an approach to these questions is more authoritarian in that technical sense, is to use authority to impose ourselves rather than a liberal idea of freedom that allows individuals to exercise their particular agency and express ideas or thoughts that is unique to them. And what we see is a corruption of language. I've studied 6 languages. I find language fascinating because of the ideas that people seek to share. I find people remarkably amusing. And what we see here, I think, exemplifies the corruption of language that is at play. It says, warning, this is an inclusive society. And if we feel you are talking, thinking, or behaving in a non-inclusive way, you will be excluded. And some of you chuckle, but this is exactly what is happening now. This is exactly what is happening on other fronts that we're working on, of organizations that are saying we will be an inclusive organization, so we must shut out opinions that challenge that. That's what they say explicitly. And what it shows to me is a real lack of faith in their arguments to be able to demonstrate that they are an inclusive organization and they're willing to even accept those who disagree with them. You may not want to follow the Free Speech Union's work, but if you did, you would probably see that within our governing council, I have my feet held to the fire all the time. And quite often, council members will come out online and say, nah, we didn't get this right. This was a dumb idea. And you know what we do there? We have a conversation about it. And I'm not abandoned by my council. We don't have to hide behind the fact that we all agree. We don't. We couldn't agree on where to go to lunch, let alone many of these other more important issues. But what we do is we believe in the agency of individuals and the right for them to make up their own ideas. And we are able to advance a stronger case as a result. So that's what I want to encourage you to consider in your roles and in the ways that public venues are made available. Go along and attend them, challenge them, speak out, use your voice both as elected members and as individuals in this community. But where we see councils or other authorities taking positions that either removes the ability for them to be platformed or, if I may suggest this, even just appears to do that, it is an own goal. And I hope together we are able to move into a position where we are more robust in our debate, and through that we can shut down bad ideas by exposing them to the sunlight disinfectant, and we are able to accept new ideas as well that we hadn't otherwise considered. So I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. Any questions? Is that your presentation?
That's my presentation.
Is it?
Yep.
Yeah. No one else wants to jump in? No.
They'll join me in the Q&A. Yep.
Okay. Cool. Yep. Cool. Okay. Right. Questions, councillors. Councillor Taylor. Oh, did you have one? No. Councillor Campbell. Sorry.
Thanks for coming. I just and look, a nice talk, and I just wanted to add something into the mix there. And I did send you some material on what I believe. I think you possibly might have come to the capital of censorship of elected members in council chambers. Actually, I don't know. I haven't been a councillor in every council around the country, so I'm sure that it varies. But I'll just outline my point here. I would like to discuss how this council runs its meetings and how elected members, I say, are effectively being gagged by procedure since the change in standing orders was brought about last October. You know, I'm not objecting, and we're talking about seconding a item to be able to be put onto a council agenda. And I'm not objecting to seconding, and it is a common enough practice, but I object to it being used as a preemptive filter, as now practiced here in these chambers, where councillors can't even raise an issue without pre-approval first. So the issue is all about how it's being applied. Now, in Taupō from last October, the rules now prevent any elected member from even tabling a matter unless someone else, another elected member, gives permission first. Now, that is not debate, that is quiet censorship through procedure. My concern isn't with standing orders as a whole, it is with the chilling effect that these specific restrictions can have. I mean, for goodness sakes, when we had this so-called debate in October to change standing orders, I was not even given my proper chance to speak against it. And as a background to that, several of my notice of motions submitted before that time, only a half dozen or so, the entire time, were of the most benign topics, from elected members having to give, being expected to give some written accountability of their activities, so to a simple acknowledgement of a Court of Appeal case from Wellington and its relevance to Taupō. Even at the most benign issues, I did get a chance to table it and present it. That was the main point. But those benign issues could not get a seconder for debate. And I've said to my other fellow councillors that I am committed to seconding any item in advance on any subject under the sun, whether it's to acknowledge the Earth is flat or the sky is green, and in the interests of free speech for elected members in this council chambers, and I challenge any one of the rest of you to do the same, and then we're covered around this. So to finish up, in a council like ours, which also doesn't even allow informal elected member updates on meeting agendas, I know most councils would do that, I say that all we are left with is free speech for the chairperson and nobody else. And I'm just interested to hear what the Free Speech Union would have to say about that.
This is quite a precise example, and really it would depend on the details. You and I have discussed this issue at some length, and I hear your frustration. I would also suggest that there is a very legitimate interest in understanding the material that we presented at a meeting and ensuring that there is a broad desire for it to be discussed. So I guess I might reply to your question with a question. If there is and this reveals my lack of understanding of the details on this, so I could have this wrong. If there is a requirement for you to have but a single other councillor second your motion, is that an unreasonable threshold on which the time of the council can be demanded?
Thank you. Yep. Oh, do you want to answer that, Dane?
Yeah. In response to that, I mean, if elected members were inundating the agendas with items left, right, and centre and taking extortionate amount of time, I would say a more reasonable approach would be to limit the number of those.
With respect, that wasn't my question.
Oh, I do think it's unreasonable. I actually do think it's unreasonable because to expect to get to attract a seconder before you've even really introduced, it takes a bit of time to introduce a topic, a new topic. It actually takes a bit of effort to prepare material and prepare a case.
Yeah.
And if you do all that and you can't even attract one seconder, and you're also not going to be publicly aired, that is a restriction.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt, it is a restriction. It's not really possible to argue against that. It's a question of whether it's a legitimate one. My wife is a district councillor. I'm very familiar with the demands on your time for preparation and engagement prior to meetings. And in this case, with respect, councillor, without knowing further details of the way this policy has been applied, I would have two comments. The first being, at prima facie, it doesn't seem to be an illegitimate imposition due to the value of the council's time and the fact that you have the opportunity to collaborate with your councillor or your fellow councillors prior to these meetings in order to ensure you have a seconder. The second being a comment more broadly to the council that I hope it's Duncan, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I hope Duncan's concerns are heard, and that the core premise of my presentation here is that if his concerns are not given due weight and are not heard sufficiently, it is quite possible that could be a counterproductive approach for the rest of the council. And so I'm not suggesting whether that has occurred or not, but I believe that through dialogue and through compromise, a meeting of ways could be found here in what appears to be a legitimate standing order.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for your answer. Any other questions or queries? Yep. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you for the presentation. I don't disagree with anything you say at all. Nothing. I agree with it all.
How unfortunate. It's always more interesting when we disagree on one thing at least.
I do have one, I guess, question to test the waters on things, though. Do you think there are any parameters to free speech? Can it go too far? Where is too far, do you think?
So two slightly different questions there. Are there any parameters on free speech? Without a doubt. Can it go too far? That's characterizing in a slightly different way. And so I would answer in this way. Free speech is not simply speech that is free. That's a very reductionist kind of pimple-faced teenager at history class arguing anyone should be allowed to say anything. We don't stand by that whatsoever. Free speech, I encourage our staff to write it with a capital F and a capital S to indicate it as a proper noun. It is a body of thought, it is a philosophical way of viewing the world that premises the fact that we are better off through engaging in dialogue, through listening to others, even if they are, and this really is the case, but even if they are 100% wrong. So their free speech itself as that philosophical premise, I don't think free speech goes too far. But there are certainly instances where free speech becomes action. And at that point, that is where legitimate constraints apply. The brightest line on this, without a doubt, is incitement to violence. And again, that's why I premise this as a philosophical notion. People think I'm compromising at that point, that I'm not truly a free speech advocate by saying that incitement to violence is by no means accepted by free speech. They're wrong, because the understanding there would be that you're kind of going along, you're free speech. Oh, we went too far, incitement to violence, not free speech anymore. But that's not how it works. If free speech is the premise that we use ideas and we use dialogue and we use engagement to change each other's minds, it's not that incitement to violence and free speech sit juxtaposed to each other. They're at opposite ends of the spectrum. One is a premise that we do not impose on each other through violence or through force, through harassment or through abuse. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have this unacceptable idea that we can impose on each other through violence. And that is the antithesis of free speech. So any true free speech advocate is ultimately an advocate against violence. And that is the reality. We must understand that as our society, and again, I want to reference the fact that a majority of Kiwis think that free speech is under threat in New Zealand. As our society wrestles with this question, and as particularly English-speaking countries around the world do, we must remember that the alternative to free speech is violence. We saw that at the Julian Batchelor events, possibly on both sides. We saw that at Parliament. We saw that at Albert Park. We see that on these incredibly contentious issues, that if we do not stand for the right for people to speak, we will not simply not have to deal with these ideas anymore. We will have to deal with them in a far more aggressive manner. Another example would be defamation. I believe that it is perfectly legitimate to go through a process of demonstrating that an individual not only lied, lies theoretically are protected by free speech, such as misinformation. It's knowingly lying. And again, it goes back to the philosophical purpose of free speech. If the philosophical purpose of free speech is to pursue truth and draw people together, it is the antithesis at that point. That is not a license to say, well, it's misinformation, you don't get free speech, because it is about the intention and knowingly participating in that. And that I don't want to use an example, actually, because who knows where those would land. But if someone made an aspersion on a councillor but truly believes that is the case, that's not defamation. If it is an honestly held opinion, it does not hold up in law. It is when they knowingly spread assertions that are defamatory and unconstructive. I think there is a legitimate constraint at that point.
Councillor Campbell.
I think I've got the floor.
All right. I found the Free Speech Union position on the drag queen and libraries situation interesting. But sorry, what was your name?
Nick.
No, I heard your talk about that. I asked you about that. You came a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
So I understand it a bit more now. Okay. I understand the position point a bit more now. But I'm interested also. So you're condemning. I mean, I wasn't there, of course. I mean, I only saw the Destiny Church thing they did there. I mean, I wasn't aware they were threatening violence. I mean, is it not a legitimate position to suggest that, well, support their
right to kind of
right to say something about it at the time? I mean,
without a doubt, and we have consistently done that. That they have absolutely every right to present their concerns, and I will acknowledge the concerns of many Kiwis around this material and its legitimate place in public discourse. Yep. However, that's not what they did. They then went into a building to intervene in an event, to do a haka, with the explicit and acknowledged purpose of disrupting the event. There is, I would be very interested in your response here. In my opinion, there are no grounds to suggest that what they were attempting to do here was counter-protest. They consistently acknowledged, and I met with Brian Tamaki for about 4 hours 2 weeks ago or so. We catch a lot of heat when we condemn him for Thug's veto. We then stand by our line and say, well, we will meet with and talk with anyone. And then we catch a lot of heat for talking to him. And I just suggest broadly, where we're at on many of these issues is if you talk to the people I don't like, or if you express the ideas I don't like, then I don't like you. And if you say the things I like, or if you meet with the people I like, then I like you. This is incredibly reductionist. This is very tribalistic. We can achieve so much more in a liberal democracy. And I think it is a very shallow state of public discourse if that is the way we're now going to engage. And so what I'd say there is, no, I'm happy to continue the conversation, but to me it is self-evident. And I think Man Up and Destiny Church and Brian Tamaki has acknowledged that the intent was there to go and disrupt the event. And that is entirely illegitimate. You do not disrupt events through force. You disrupt it by depriving them of an audience because you present alternative perspectives and you win the day by changing people's minds.
No, are you able to clarify? I mean, I didn't pay close attention to it, but I didn't perceive that they were trying to literally go into the same room and intervene.
That's what they were doing.
I thought they were more sort of protesting in a public space about it.
If they had stood in the car park and done that haka, we would have absolutely respected their right to do that. In fact, it is not only a right to do that, it is our duty to do that. Democracies only function when individuals participate as in their role of self-governance. And so it's not that we all have the right to speak out. We must speak out. We must use this because there's no reason to think the marketplace of ideas will occur if only one side of the market is contributing. We must use our voices. But what they did there was not stand in the car park and condemn it and provide an alternative and challenge it. They tried to shut it down. And that's not acceptable.
Councillor Greenslade.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Patrick.
I do certainly agree with pretty much everything that you have said. And as a councillor, we are sort of foremost in being open to attack from the public over our views. And you actually just made a very good point there, which was part of what I was going to talk about, was this situation where if somebody doesn't agree with what I say, they call me a dummy or a crony. And I struggle with that because as you say, I'm entitled to my views and I'm entitled to say what I think. And I have found increasingly as a councillor that I am not expressing those views any longer because it's very difficult in a public space when you stand on your own and you have an opinion and you are attacked personally. So as I've stayed on council and gone a little bit further down the track, I do the ubiquitous nodding. And the nodding says, I hear you, but it is mistaken for I agree with you. Mm-hmm. And so I can think of a few instances recently where public and others have attacked not only me, but councillors for our views. And it's very difficult. It's not so much of a question, but I'd just like to hear your views on that.
I can absolutely relate. I understand your position entirely. Many of you will perhaps be aware of instances where what I consider probably quite legitimately defamatory comments have been made about me, not only misrepresentations, but intentional misrepresentations. It's a difficult position for me as the chief executive of the Free Speech Union to take a defamation case, though I think it wouldn't be hypocritical, but I wouldn't win the comms battle on that, I don't think. But I can entirely relate. I'm sure every single one of you, both staff and councillors, can relate to the intensity of public dialogue at the moment. And this is where we must do what we each can to lower that tone. And to be honest, I think there are ways that through collaboration across the council, where I know different political positions and perspectives exist, we can still speak out in in support of the motivation that brings individuals here. I think very, very few people actually participate in public debate for malicious reasons. And that doesn't for a moment mean that their ideas are correct or deserve to be upheld, but it means that they don't deserve to be torn down as an individual for their perspectives. The only thing I think, Sandra, where perhaps you and I disagree is I think it's not even a disagreement necessarily. I simply think it's sad that you have self-censored. You are a voice in this community. You have a duty to speak up. You signed up for that duty. You take a pay for that duty, and to remove your voice from that discourse is an entirely understandable decision. But I'm sure others are poorer as a result of it, who otherwise do agree with you, and who don't have the position that you do.
Councillor, you got just a quick response from Councillor Greenslade.
As a woman in a public space, it's not safe. And I've been in that position, in this role, in a public space, and it is not safe.
Well,
and I had 3 men standing over me, and they were taller and bigger and stronger than me, and there was no opportunity for me to stand my ground because it wasn't safe. And that is very intimidating.
Absolutely.
And it is more intimidating for a woman than it actually is for a man. So, I hear what you say, and probably you can guess my age. I was a 60s kid. I wouldn't have dreamt that I would ever have been in that situation, because that was our whole thing in the 60s, wasn't it? Was speaking up and saying our bit. But time goes along, and I think what you're saying is absolutely true, that so often the voices of reason, or the voice that's different, it invites personal attack.
If I can just acknowledge your experience there, and by no means do I mean to belittle it, but I hope that's a temperature take. These are comments that we hear across the country, and really what we need police to do then, and this is one of the, I'm going to get on my soapbox here, one of the core campaigns we're running is for police to do more, to do their jobs, to defend the basic freedom that you have, which is to think for yourself and have the right to express that. And at the moment, what we see more often, we have numerous cases before the High Court at the moment where individuals have been arrested for saying things that are entirely legitimate, and the reason they are arrested is because it's unsafe for them to say it, and they would rather remove an individual who is expressing something that is legitimate and possibly true. We have no idea whether it's true or not unless they get to say it, that they are arrested because the crowd might turn on them. And some of you might know of the case of Lucy Rogers. This will be a significant High Court decision, and we must see it go all the way. We must see police take responsibility for it, because it is unacceptable in a free society for individuals to silence themselves or be silenced by police, allegedly for their own safety. This is Orwellian. And I suggest if other individuals from other demographics made the comments you have, there would be a different response from individuals present here. This is not good for our country.
I just add as well, as an organisation, our team get called names from things like fascist to pedophile. We get this every day, and I don't wish that on anyone else. But part of the work that we're doing with the educational outreach is to actually help young people understand, and adults too, if they've forgotten it, that this is about a culture change. It's about understanding that free speech is about a constructive method of error correction, whereby peace is the process by which we pursue change. And if we can't do that, and if we can't ingrain that in our culture once more, we did have it in the past, not perfect, but we did have it. We've lost that over probably the last generation. And I'm in my 40s, and I do remember in my teens being able to have conversations that we cannot have now. So we need to come back to that and understand that it's a constructive, and it's not about ad hominem. It's not about the person themselves. Unfortunately, ideas, issues have been conflated with identities. And some people believe it's the same thing, but I think we need to come back to first principles and say, hold on, we could separate those two things. Yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Jonathan. Your comments a second are a nice segue into the question I've got. And I'm picking up on a question Rachel raised, and I guess like many others here, we watch what's happening in the States closely, and I have watched your group's actions with my former colleagues, and I'd have to say I'm somewhat embarrassed by some of the actions I see my former colleagues taking in response to free speech action. I guess my question is, you've answered it partially, but I wonder, given the Criminal Code, we've got the Summary Offences Act details a number of things which the line is drawn around language. The Crimes Act around threatening violence and encouraging suicide, and there's a number of other, both within the criminal and civil code. What's your level of comfort with the fit for purpose our current code is? And if the code is fine, both criminal and civil, is it just the application of that that's an issue? I'll be interested in your comments on that.
It's a very important question because, for example, many Kiwis were unaware of the fact that we have hate speech laws in New Zealand in the Human Rights Act. A single prosecution has been taken of that. So what we have enjoyed is a culture that had deference to these values. However, there are portions of our laws that are not fit for purpose and that are being used by what could be considered bad faith actors, or certainly those who do not have deference for free speech, as ways of silencing others. An example of that is an individual by the name of Paul Burns. And Paul Burns is a Catholic. He goes to Mass on Sundays, and Sunday afternoons he goes out and he advocates, in his opinion, for the rights of the unborn. And he stands at the northern end of Lambton Quay, which is, if some of you may know, right opposite Parliament. And he has a sign that says $100 for anyone who can convince me slavery is more evil than abortion. Paul was arrested in April last year because he was having a conversation with someone, and someone else walked by and was offended by it and called the cops, and they arrested him for knowingly and intentionally in public saying things that could offend someone. This happened in New Zealand. Under our law, someone was arrested for publicly offending not someone he was even talking to, someone who overheard the conversation. Now, we engaged that process.
That's an example I had in mind. Yeah.
And the courts eventually threw that out some 10 months later or so. We thought the cop was over eager here. Surely once it gets before the courts, they will throw it out. They didn't throw it out. They upgraded the charges to disturbance of the peace. He could have gone to prison, theoretically, for this. And eventually he was entirely exonerated. And the chairman of the Free Speech Union, who is the only individual in New Zealand who's a practicing doctor and lawyer, represented him in this case. And he noted that Mr. Burns had a comment to the judge when he was acquitted that was quite unlike most of the other individuals he represents. The judge said, "Mr. Burns, you are therefore acquitted. Is there anything you'd like to say before you leave?" And Mr. Burns said, Your Honour, I just want you to know that Jesus loves you. And our chairman, who is not a man of faith himself, was taken by the comment, which was quite different to the remarks that many of his other clients will make. We are seeing what otherwise at a different time were legitimate laws that were not abused. And in reality, any law, health and safety laws, no one intended when health and safety laws were implemented for these to be used to silence perspective, to say there is a wairua in this room that we must not contaminate, and so certain perspectives can't be heard. That was never the intention of the law. And yet that is how these laws, it is unsafe for me to be here because I don't like your ideas, so therefore you are breaching health and safety laws. This is by no means what was intended there. And this is my fundamental contention with respect to perhaps lawyers who are in the room. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't think law will be the solution to this. We need good laws, we need good academics, but what we need is leaders who believe that individuals speaking for themselves and thinking for themselves is the foundation on which our society has been built. You referenced the United States. To be honest, I'm even more concerned with specifically what you're saying with regards to police with the United Kingdom, where non-criminal hate incidences have become a norm over the past 8 years. And this is what is currently being introduced in New Zealand. We are taking police to court over this. It is extrajudicial. It is illegal. They've gone ahead of Parliament, who specifically decided not to expand hate speech laws. There is no reference to hate crime laws in any of our laws, and yet that is what they are being trained to pursue. We must stand up to these people, and we need leaders across the fore. I don't ask you to agree with me on my politics at all. I hope you don't know what my ideas are. I ask you whether you agree on this idea and whether we'll have leaders that stand up for it.
Councillor Campbell.
Yes. Just reflecting on your response to my question before. Look, I do put down your response to me that, down to a somewhat limited understanding of councils and the importance, as I see it, of elected members having free discourse and ability to freely discuss and introduce ideas. But I will throw in here that around here that at Taupō District Council that does extend to council staff censoring, or for example, councillors get a regular monthly or bi-monthly contribution in a newspaper in the council media outlook. I mean, I've been rejected and censored my contribution before on the basis of supposed misinformation, which I actually could justify, and I'm refusing to contribute to that publication anymore. But getting back to your second point on there, and I can absolutely assure you that yes, the actions of changing our standing orders, which was directed against me because it affected only me, actually has absolutely affected my working relationship with the rest of them. So I'll leave it at that.
You have questions or queries? It's been absolutely enlightening presentation here today, and you know, I always thought of your organisation as a little bit anti or whatever. I've been remiss as to not been understanding your organisation, and certainly, you know, I feel, and see the councillors nodding here, you're a breath of fresh air, and that's wonderful.
We appreciate the opportunity to have a more constructive form of engagement.
Yeah, sure. Just the last thing, security. You know, like I think our last event got cancelled or deferred or something because of security. What is your view on security when members of the public or whatever are at risk? There's been threats made, all that sort of thing. How would we handle that?
Putting aside a difference of opinions on the reference to the specific case, more generally, the Moncrief Spittal Supreme Court decision that we took presents quite a clear element to that, which is that health and safety cannot be used unilaterally as a reason not to hold an event. However, through a specific process that is undertaken where police believe that there is a noted risk to physical safety, and I note physical safety, there's a key element, and that other preventative measures are not possible. At that point, we agree it is viable to then shut down the meeting. We're not going to suggest that if there's a bomb scare, that we go, well, no, the meeting has to go ahead because otherwise this is censorship. I mean, it is censorship. It's not censorship on behalf of the council or otherwise. It's censorship on behalf of those in the community who would seek to use violence to silence others. And what my encouragement to you would then be is let that be a wake-up call for the time that we live in. The fact that in the Moncrief Spittal case, which appeared before the Supreme Court, was the extension of the original case that we took in 2018. I don't think the leaders in Auckland have reflected on the fact that some individuals wanted to come and present what are otherwise legal opinions, and members of their community wanted to use violence to shut them down. That should be something that I think all leaders take a note of. And so I will add just one more comment with respect to that. The imposition, we hold 60 events a year. We hold many events around the country, and it is not infrequent for us to be required to have security. And by and large, we just comply with that. However, we could push it to an extent of saying, no, you don't have a police security test here, you don't have any evidence to believe it. We have never had any instance where violence was remotely possible. And yet it is a considerable demand on our resources, considering we have to pay for it, to use this. And when we haven't pushed that point yet extensively, but we can imagine circumstances where security costs could be used as a discrete way to silence certain individuals. And we would rather count, and I appreciate the interests you have in lowest rates possible, etc. But what is the value of free speech in the Taupo district? And if a group wants to make a case that others will attempt to use violence to suppress, I think it is in the council's interest to say we will allow you to have the speech, and we will ensure, because it is our duty as our leaders and it is the role of police to ensure that you have those rights protected. And at that point, you wouldn't see people who are otherwise poor but have legitimate interest in speech being unable to do so publicly.
Very goodly. Any other final comments or questions? Councillor Greenslade?
Oh, yeah, I was first, I think. I got shut off. But just while we're on the subject of that stop co-governance incident, which was how this all came about, I thought it would be a pertinent question to ask our mayor and CEO. Did we learn anything from that, and would we do it different next time?
You want to comment on that, Julie, or no?
My comment in that regard is I've really appreciated the opportunity to meet with Jonathan separately to talk through that matter, and we've agreed to have a constructive working relationship going forward. So my comment would be to respect the conversation that we've had and thank him for his time.
I've lost it. Just following on from that comment that you make, Jonathan. So if there's a meeting, and it doesn't matter what it is, in the district, for instance, who makes the call as to whether the police attend or not?
I'm not sure I exactly understand the question, but
well, if I decide to have a meeting and it's a controversial meeting about a topic in the district, and I'm a little worried about security, and I make a call to the police and I say, look, I'm talking about whatever, it's such and whatever, and I know it's controversial. I'm just letting you know. But I've let them know. So what's the process? What happens?
At that point, it's entirely police's discretion, and if you inform that and it's more than you and two of your mates having a cup of tea, they'll assess the validity of the threat, and that's their call to make. Two comments with regards to that, if I may, and one of them is just with regards to the CEO's comment as well. Currently, there's legislation in the Members' Bill before Parliament that we have strongly opposed that would allow police to charge out their time and recoup costs when events like this occur. And it's unclear to me what the role of police is and what they exist in our society to do if it is not to defend the basic freedoms of lawful citizens. And it is an outrage, and we've made this very, very clear with Greg Fleming, the Member of Parliament who's promoting this material, and I don't think it will go through given the opposition we've hoisted, but it's an outrage that people would have to pay out of their pockets for police who exist to defend their basic rights. Now, obviously, there are legitimate constraints on police capacity. They have systems in place to evaluate that. And in certain instances, they may say that police cannot attend, but we suggest you have private security. And I don't necessarily see that as illegitimate. But what we must not see is police hoisting costs on individuals or outfits because what they are saying is legal but unpopular. With respect to the chief executive's comments, I would echo our appreciation for the positive engagement here. We are a civil organisation in a society that has allowed civil organisations largely to fall by the wayside. We don't have a particularly mature civil society in New Zealand, and that means at times we have to make a lot of noise to get the attention, and we've appreciated the relationship we've had with councils such as Blenheim District Council as well, where dialogue is able to emerge. Unfortunately, this is not the case with other councils like Hutt City Council, where we are before the High Court with them right now. They made the decision to remove that a private newspaper had a ad that had been paid for that was present in their libraries, and they made the decision that this was misinformation in the ad and that they would remove all the newspapers from their libraries so others could not see it because the ad did not have a counterexample beside it. And I didn't know that Bunnings had to run ads beside Mitre 10 Mega now in order to have a variety of perspectives apparent. This is, I do hope we can all agree, this is censorship. That's what it is. There is no two ways about it. There is not another word for it. This is the chief executive of a council deciding that certain opinions should not be available in their library when the very book that was being referenced in that advert was available in that library, because it was, in her opinion, her august and informed opinion, allegedly, misinformation. This is what is happening at a large council. And so I do hope that we will appreciate there is a fight on our hands at the moment. And we need leaders to stand up, to work along. So we don't want your support. That would hurt our brand. We don't want your support. We want you to stand up for free speech and stand up as leaders in your communities.
Beautiful. Enlightening. Thank you very much, councillors and presenters today. And yeah, I realise that. And we do look forward to your couple of bottles of the finest. I
encourage you to read the back label. We've had some fun out of that about grapes grown in free dialogue and uncorking opinions and that kind of thing. So.
Cool. Councillor Campbell's, you want something? Yep.
Oh, it's come to me.
Right.
I'll just throw in there a suggestion for Councillor Greenslade. If councillors are concerned of safety, yeah, but I mean, the police are worth a try, but is there an avenue for employing, I know council has a security firm that it employs on a regular basis, carting along a couple of them if there's some concerns for that. I'm just throwing it out there.
Councillor Shepherd.
Cool.
Yeah, just a comment to perhaps reflect on, I guess. Honestly, it's a shame we have to defend freedom of speech. It really is. It's a shame. But isn't it also a great shame that we've come to expect violence in response from generally both sides of the argument? So honestly, I'm asking myself how it came to this.
That's right.
Very good. Okay. Thank you once again, everyone. Good to see you guys. Thank you for travelling up today.
I have a relatively extensive opinion on how we came to this, so perhaps we can continue that offline.
Very good. Okay, workshop closed. Thank you.